Good day, everybody. This is Judd Watts, Global Alliance Manager with Teradata, and it's been my pleasure to work with WhereScape for a number of years and our mutual clients together. Today we get to hear some of the insights and advice of Larry H. Miller Sports and Entertainment and what they've been able to do with data warehouse automation. A little background on Larry H. Miller Sports and Entertainment. They've been operating a number of distinct businesses, including the NBA's Utah Jazz, Fans.com, Just Sports Retail, the Megaplex movie theaters, chain of movie theaters, minor league baseball and basketball teams, Larry H. Miller Sports and Entertainment. At once upon a time, they ran multiple data platforms, including Amazon Redshift, Microsoft SQL Server, Oracle, and their own unique ERP, CRM, and loyalty and web software solutions. Last year, the recent consolidation of IT operations, the company migrated its diverse set of data assets into a single Teradata cloud data warehouse instance. And today we get to learn how a small, lean and mean IT staff leverage WhereScape data warehouse automation software to greatly accelerate a massive data migration and a development effort, providing dramatically faster time to insight. And it's my pleasure to introduce Jack Howard, who's a global principal architect with WhereScape. The others here, Teradata customers and Teradata participants on this call, it'll be interesting to know from the perspective. Jack was many, many years a Teradata customer, a number of years Teradata solution architect, particularly in the manufacturing industry, received high accolades and recognition for his roles there at Teradata, and was so impressed with what he saw in the way to data warehouse automation software, he joined WhereScape 6 or 7 years ago. So pleasure to introduce Jack. He's going to be kind of the MC today. Equally so, we're really fortunate to have Khrisha, Rigby, and Dustin Spangler with Larry H. Miller here to talk about their organization's journey to the cloud and what they've learned along the way. The session here today is geared more of a question and answer or an interview type format rather than a presentation, and we'll have Jack serving as our facilitator, interviewer, MC. You're welcome to enter questions as well as for Khrisha or Dustin in the chat box on your screen. We'll attempt to get through as many of those questions within the 45-minute interview, and we'll go from there. I also might point out on the left side of your screen there are some handouts. So if you'd like to download some of those as a walk-away, some data sheets, some other copy of this presentation, it's available to you in that handouts link. But with that, well, let me give you a little bit of perspective here as well, too. Khrisha, who's going to do a lot of this presentation, has been an ETL developer for Larry H. Miller Sports and Entertainment. 14 years working with databases, data warehousing, and ETL on various different platforms. She's worked as part of this team leveraging the tools to migrate data and implement data warehouses for several entities within the Larry H. Miller Sports and Entertainment Group. Dustin's Vice President, Data Analytics for Larry H. Miller Sports and Entertainment, co-founder also of Outlaw Informatics. She's got more than 20 years of experience in helping companies drive value from their business intelligence and analytics objectives. Yeah, he enjoys traveling and spending time with wife and 3 kids, loves sports, fantasy football fanatic, and with that, I'll hand things off to Jack. Thanks very much.
Hey, thanks, Judd. Really appreciate that introduction, and boy, I'd like to welcome Khrisha and Dustin, and really excited for you guys to share your story about what you've been able to do with data warehouse automation and your journey in establishing that practice at your company. Dustin, could you just maybe give us a little bit more insight about what's going on at Larry H. Miller? Pretty interesting group of companies there. Maybe just give us a little bit deeper idea about what's going on there.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know Judd talked a little bit about some of the entities, but maybe if I can kind of walk through some of the unique challenges or opportunities that it presents us. So as those that are online can look and see this slide here, the sports and entertainment division of the Larry H. Miller Group services is really part of a number of different companies. So one of them, the most notable, is the Utah Jazz, but also the Vivint Smart Home Arena, where the Jazz games are played, as well as numerous other events are held throughout the year. The Anaheim Angels minor league affiliate, the Utah Jazz G League affiliate. We do the Tour of Utah, which we think is the preeminent stage race here in North America, as well as the fans retail sporting apparel that also operates in the Northwest as Just Sports, and movie theater, the Megaplex movie theater chain, as well as a radio station and a TV broadcast. And that's just an extremely diverse group of companies that all have very different needs, very different data structures. When we first started down this path about 1.5 years ago, they all had very different source systems. They may not be all leveraging the same technologies and platforms. And so really our opportunity was to find ways to help each one of those companies in their own way leverage the data that they have, just given the unique reach that we have because of the number of different entities. It gives us a great opportunity to know and understand our customers better, and that's really kind of what drove our data warehousing initiative, was to get to understand and be able to offer better services and experiences to our consumers.
Well, yeah, that's great. And just kind of looking at that, such a diverse platform, I was wondering if you just describe us a little bit about how you guys came to Teradata and what your experience was or prior to this, your time at Larry H. Miller with Teradata, both for you and Khrisha.
Yeah. So if I look back at kind of where we were previously on a SQL Server environment here. For most of the entities, they had a series of a few data marts, and then kind of my background worked on a number of different RDBMS platforms, SQL Server, Oracle, Postgres, as well as some experience with Teradata when I was at Overstock.com, and so it had a fairly wide background then. And one of the reasons that we chose to go with Teradata was so that we could leverage having all of the entities on a consolidated platform without being impacted by performance when different entities are running different queries, and really leveraging Teradata's workload management to get that high level of performance that we needed for the number and the complexity of queries that we're running.
Great. And then what about your team and how they're aligned now with your practice?
Yeah, so I think one of the unique challenges that we went through is we have a very small team. When we started this last July, we had a team of 2 developers, and on the ETL side, and 1 BI developer to handle the front end and the presentation layer. About halfway through the year, we added an additional ETL developer. But as we get into some of the details as to the number of things that were accomplished and the value that was brought, keep in mind all of that was being done by just a small team.
Great. And then when you decided to go with Teradata, you went to the cloud, and I just would like to know a little bit more. I think it's interesting that you guys have come up completely in the cloud. Maybe you could share what that experience has been like.
Yeah, so the short version on the cloud experience is, for the most part, for us, it's been a non-issue or a non-challenge. We wouldn't have known the difference whether our instance was sitting in the cloud or if it was sitting in our data center. Really what we were looking to do is to get out of the data storage and server management business and let other people manage that for us. And so that's part of what was driving us to the cloud, so that we didn't want to be managing the data center. We also knew that we were going to be moving locations a couple of times, as we just recently renovated the arena and a number of our office spaces. And that also enabled us not to have to move data centers and take our data warehouse offline for any transitions and changes. And so for the most part, it's been seamless for us.
Well, that's great. And now maybe shifting gears a little bit, Khrisha, I'd just really like to have you share the story about what it's been like before the project. You were there before the move to Teradata. Maybe you could just kind of characterize what you were facing and dealing with in that time before Teradata.
Yeah, so before the migration, it was kind of like the wild, wild west. There was, we had several different platforms, several different entities. Everybody operated their own way. There was different levels of BI. Some didn't have any at all. They were sharing their sales data through Excel and email. We had other entities that were a little bit more advanced with using cubes and SSIS and SSRS for reporting. There was like silos of knowledge in the business processes. There's no standards or consistency. What should be a data-driven decision was a gut feel decision. We're running several different systems like SQL Server, SQL Anywhere, Oracle. There was like little to no analytics being performed. We were not able to.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I know. Yeah, and just kind of looking at that, maybe going forward, as you started to build this out, what did you see in terms of the ability to pull this off, to move to a better environment?
Well, we wanted to be able to answer simple questions like, because we have such a diverse business, we wanted to be able to answer like who are our customer? Like, did our customer buy the latest Yankees and you Gear, and also was a season ticket holder to the Bees games? Did our customers love going to the movies every Friday and also go to a Jazz game once a month? Did one customer live by one theater but went and purchased tickets to a theater 15 miles away because they like the IMAX screen? Did How Go Bear play one night? Did How Go Bear play drive up or down sales of his jerseys? Did the opening weekend of Star Wars drive down ticket sales of a Jazz game? These are just some of the simple questions we wanted to be able to answer.
That's great. So, yeah, just kind of looking at, going forward here with your landscape that you came to here. Maybe we could just talk a little bit about the technology to deliver the answers to those questions.
Sorry, repeat that again, Jack.
Well, I thought maybe, so we've talked a little bit about the business side, and now, just kind of looking at your technology stack, really kind of looking at how did you come to your tool selection within your choice of automation?
Yeah, so we looked at a couple of different tools in regards to the automation and really kind of how we wanted to manage that. And so maybe if I can take a little bit of a step back even before tool selection, we went through and put together a roadmap and looked at what we wanted to be able to accomplish for the business from a high level. And then as we kind of drilled down a little bit, we set some guiding principles, if you will, for how we wanted to structure our analytics environment and the data warehouse environment, and really kind of some of the approaches that we wanted to take. And one of those guiding principles that we set was analytics is greater than engineering. And so really what that meant for us is we needed to make sure that when we're looking at tools and processes, that those tools and processes enable us to produce the analytics faster, as opposed to maybe we can solve something really cool from a technical perspective by writing a bunch of code, but not delivering business value. And so that's part of why we selected WhereScape, was specifically for that purpose, to help us be able to iterate faster on our projects and spend less time coding.
Yeah, well, and then maybe, Khrisha, could you just kind of look at how the demo process worked and how you selected sort of those tests that made you comfortable with that technology selection?
Yeah, so we decided on Teradata basically because we did have members of the team that had previous experience with it. I personally had only worked with SQL Server and the BI stack, and we had a demo through Teradata where we gave them a bunch of queries that just took, 30 minutes to hours. And Teradata reformatted those queries and ran them, and they ran in seconds. And so at that demo, that's when I knew I was sold on Teradata.
Oh, great. And then just kind of looking at the number of source systems and 2 developers, looks a little daunting, really. I mean, I think that's quite impressive that you have that many different source systems. Just wanted to maybe dive into that a little bit more in terms of what you guys have been able to do. You've been able to onboard these systems with 2 developers. So just kind of looking at the migration effort to onboard those systems, maybe Khrisha, could you just tell us what went well and what the challenges were? Oh, what's happened is the Larry Miller team has lost communication. They've lost the call. I just got that in the chat window. So looking back at this, that's why they didn't answer the question. They have actually. Are you guys back?
Yep, sorry about that. Here we are on a landline, and now we're connected, and it still dropped the signal. So apologize for leaving you hanging there, Jack.
No problem. So really, I was just wondering, with that daunting list of 60 source systems, all that to get done, just like, maybe Khrisha, if you could just tell us what's gone well, what hasn't gone well, what the challenges were in your experience of onboarding all those sources of data into Teradata with WhereScape.
So what has gone well is just the repeatable processes using WhereScape, because we have like, just an example, we have 16 different theaters, and that data is not integrated anywhere at a higher corporate level. And so we had to find a tool that would do that for us in a speedy way. And WhereScape has a function where you can actually bring over all the tables from one of our theaters, and we can actually duplicate that and just change the source. I mean, so that was really big for us to save time, because we only had the 2 developers. It's also like metadata driven, so we were able to create the structure without having having to load the data before we needed it. So that saved us some time. The machine-generated code, because it kind of writes it for you. So we didn't have to go in and write scripts like you would have to do with the BI stack, go and write the SQL scripts. It actually writes it all for you. There's like custom data mapping where you can go in and say you want NARCAR 100 from SQL Server to transfer over to VARCAR 200 on Teradata. So that saves some time, not having to go and put that all in for every table. Loading the CSV files, because we have CSV files that the business actually maintains that we load up into Teradata. That was surprisingly easy. What didn't go well was the scheduler. We have our theaters are on a microwave, and so whenever we'd have bad weather or anything, the connection would drop. So that would actually cause the scheduler to fail. And there is no restartability, so we would have to manually go in and restart those jobs. We had some offshore help in the beginning. We thought we could just point them to some tables and say, here, go load these. That didn't end up working out. We had to actually go redo most of their work. Another thing is that we wish we wouldn't have skipped the 4-day WhereScape training to save money, because that caused us to have to go back and fix some technical debt because we didn't know the different things the little things that WhereScape could do. So we had to go back and fix that to make it so that it was done like the WhereScape way.
Great.
Trying to figure out.
Yeah. No, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off. I think one of the things, you guys had kind of looked at this idea of what had happened here, and maybe just speaking to some of these bullet points and elaborating on these might be helpful and interesting to the audience.
Yeah, so I'll touch on a couple of these, and then I'll let Khrisha talk on a couple of them. One of them, obviously, with a smaller team, because we're iterating through the code quicker, that's certainly going to help us reduce costs, as well as some of the built-in features in regard to having standards, and so different developers that tend to write code differently. By having all of your preset standards built into the tool, regardless of who the developer is, the code is consistent, and it makes it easier to read. And so those are a couple of the things that I'll touch on, and then I'll let Khrisha talk on some of the others.
Yeah, because of the repeatable processes, we were able to get 3,400 objects into production.
That's an astounding figure.
Also, I want to touch on the deploy process. The deploy process from test dev to prod is that's a really amazing thing for us. It's surprisingly easy and quick. And just the fact that WhereScape automatically creates the scripts for us, and we didn't have to actually go and write them. I mean, that was a big thing for us.
Yeah, great. I mean, I think one of the things just that we're trying to do is not make automation do anything other than excellent code quality, and really glad to hear you guys are benefiting from that. I think looking at these results that you guys have posted, it's almost, as we've shared this as partners, so maybe you could just speak to this. It almost looks like science fiction, but it's really what you guys have been able to achieve. And I was wondering if you could also kind of just talk about this and what you've been able to do and with two people, 60 sources of data, nothing but net, as they used to say in those basketball commercials on McDonald's. Maybe just tell some things about this, what you've been able to do.
So we've been able to basically get in 763 load tables into production, and that integrates to our staging tables. Then from there we were able to do a 3NF model where we integrated all the entities together into our IDW, and from there we were able to create stacking dimensions so that we could create cubes off of that. And we did all this, and this is for all the entities, and we did all this in a year.
That's really amazing. I think one of the things that's been really important to emphasize is this just wasn't a straight dump of data into a database. This was actually building a single version of the truth, which is just extremely impressive. So congratulations. I really exciting to see that kind of productivity. Just kind of looking at where we're at, maybe if you could just share some final insights, and then we'll, after that, we'll take questions. Maybe you could kind of give us your summary thoughts about, what would you share for people that will be going down this path that you've been down?
Okay. Just a couple thoughts, Jack, jumping back a little bit on that last slide. As we look at all of the things that were done there, and Khrisha touched on it a little bit, because of the diversity of all of the business units, it's both surprisingly similar and incredibly different to be able to bring all of those sources together and build a standard view structure or data structure that we can then leverage, so that if one of the financial analysts wants to pull a report for a single entity or for all of the entities together, they're able to do that against the same set of tables, and they're able to do analytics both at a whole and at each individual entity, something that could not have been done in the past. And the ease and really the seamlessness to which that was done is extremely helpful for us, and there's a ton of value that comes out of that. The other thing that happened in the middle of all of these changes is, as everybody knows, businesses don't stand still. And if we look at the number of those source systems that changed, at least for the Utah Jazz, that was pretty well every source system that we had. And a number of the other entities went through either CRM reimplementations or ERP modifications. And so that all of this is being done while the business is moving at the pace that the business does, right? I think that's worth touching on here.
Yeah, it's really almost, really it's incredible. It's an incredible story, because I think of how many businesses I've worked with over the years where they're just trying to do it for one entity, and to see you guys accomplish this on the across the entity base that you're dealing with is just incredibly impressive. So, congratulations, definitely. Very exciting. Yeah, so maybe just go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, and then kind of jumping back on the 3 tips here. So the big one for us is small incremental improvements are greater than big bang projects. While everybody wants to go and deliver something tremendously of value right out of the gate, what we focused on was small and incremental improvements and quickest time to value. So as an example, our ticketing partner for the arenas changed here just prior to the start of this NBA season. And rather than focus on getting every possible thing out of the ticketing system out of the gate, we focused on a couple of key things that the business needed to know. And then we are continuing to iterate and add new things, as opposed to telling the business to wait until next season and then we'll have a full reporting suite for them. And so I think that's key, is to just make sure that you have small incremental progress. the second point that's on there, kind of the network topology matters. One of the things that as we went through and we looked at our environment, and this was really part of the discussion in going to the cloud, is one, it was important to have a good solid connection from our offices to the cloud facility, which is in Vegas. And so we went ahead and did a dedicated 10 gig pipe for us to have that connectivity. But there was also a lot of inter-network connectivity. Khrisha touched on the microwave is the network for part of the theaters. And so we had network failures initially there that we're working on resolving, as well as we're connecting to all the retail stores. Sometimes that even meant that there's a 4G connection out to some of the retail stores. And so really trying to solidify that network, I think is one of the things that has helped us to not experience the hiccups and notice whether we're cloud or on-premise. And then kind of that last point on there about doing it right the first time. While you're trying to hurry and show value, really our big thing is you don't want to cut corners all over the place. And if you'll build it right the first time, even if it takes a little bit more time to get to that value, that is better than having tons of technical debt that you're just piling up and it's hard to get back to.
Great, got it. Yeah, just you know, we're going to take questions from the field, from the audience. But just before we get to that, you know, one, thank you, congratulations. Excited for you guys to have such great success. And you know, what's on your roadmap? What are you looking forward in your horizon in the next year? I mean, it's an astounding year. How do you top this, right?
No, I think there's some really cool and exciting things that are coming up in the next year. One of those would be, I touched on the arena renovation and talked about how we modified the arena. One of those changes that we made in the arena renovation was we opened up public Wi-Fi for all of the guests, and we've also enabled beacons for all of those access points so that we can do location services and we can track movement and traffic through the arena so that we can identify bottlenecks in lines, as well as a couple of other things in providing evidence of delivery to our corporate sponsors to communicate back to them how many people are seeing their signage and the information that they're getting there. Also with that beacon data, we can push offers to people as they walk through the arena. And so that's going to be a couple of the things. There's also some really fun opportunities as the world of esports grows. That I know the NBA has publicly announced an esports league, and more details will come out on that in the next couple of weeks, but I think that's an exciting opportunity. So yeah, there's a number of good things out there that are on the horizon.
Great. So now, thank you. And I do have a number of questions coming in from the audience. And one question is, can you address the role that management support played in your success?
Absolutely. That is one of the key things that happened before we started on this, was that the president and the leadership staff really wanted to focus on being data-driven. And for the start of the 2016-17 season, which is really how our fiscal year starts, that was one of the 4 main initiatives for the organization, was to become data-driven. And the key piece of that was the building out of the data warehouse and having that analytics environment stood up. And so they've been very supportive to this point of helping us go through and do that. And we provide quarterly updates to that leadership team on status and where we're at and the value or the business capabilities that we're enabling.
Great, thank you. And I have another question around the just the physical information of the code. How many iterations have you done or had to do, and then have you had to modify code, or how have you modified code, and how complete was what WhereScape did for you?
As far as modifying code, there's actually, if you don't want to just do a straight load to stage like in our 3NF model, there's actually different parts in WhereScape where you can put in like a where clause or a group by or anything like that. It's actually in the interface, so you actually don't modify the code that WhereScape generates.
Right. I would just sort of say you can if you want to, but why would you when it's right?
Yeah.
That, you know, by making those additions that you've made. Yeah. Cool. And I've got another question, and this is maybe more on the Teradata side in terms of what kind of workload do you have in production, and, you know, user queries and things like that. Are you guys tracking that?
Yeah, absolutely. I saw that question come in, and I was trying to pull up from our offshore DBA team what those numbers were. And I have an older one that roughly 35,000 queries, end user queries per day, and that's not including any of the ETL queries or processes. But the report I'm looking at is 2 months ago. So that
Yeah,
is.
I mean,
go ahead,
yeah,
Jack.
yeah, I was just going to say, you know, really, Teradata is very capable at handling user queries. One of our customers is running over millions of queries per day, and that's just, you know, a testimony to the power of Teradata. So, you know, since we're all running Teradata natively and everything, it's just really, how much can Teradata do? A lot, you know. That's how I'd answer that. Any other questions from the audience? I'd be happy to field those. Give ourselves a few minutes, and if anyone has a question, feel free to send it through in the chat window.
Yeah, and sorry, Jack, just while I'm doing it, I pulled up the most recent report for last month, and generally throughout the month, we're running right around 400,000 queries. And from a utilization standpoint, we seldom hit above 40% utilization on our cloud instance.
It's just, it's astounding really to me, you know, how many queries are asked in a day on a Teradata. So yeah, we've got a new question. Thank you. And maybe just on the idea, are there any interesting discoveries that have come up recently from to serve your customers that have caused business action?
So I'm walking through a short list of a couple of them. You know, certainly there's one. The first ones that come to mind aren't necessarily to serve the customer, but they're more around pricing and making sure that we have certain items priced appropriately. So for example, at the movie theaters, we went through and did analysis of all of our concessions and did a major revamping of what the pricing was. And so one of the examples that I shared at Partners was around the price of chicken nuggets that we were selling a whole bunch of at a loss. And so we ended up raising the price on it, but we ended up lowering the price on a number of other concession items just to make sure that we were offering a fair market price for those items. And that's been really helpful to the bottom line, as well as pricing for tickets. That one of the things that's been rolled out this year is more dynamic pricing that's more specific to game and location. And so it's a little bit more variable than it has been in the past, which I think is helpful for consumers just because there's more options available to them.
No, that's great. Really interesting to me to see the way that the power of data and what it can do just in a real time environment, even could change the price of chicken. That's great. Yeah. So we've got another question, and really I just characterize this question of, how did having a complete database layer change your BI tool productivity and effectiveness? Have you seen any change in how easy it is to roll out BI tools based on having a great database design?
Absolutely. There's a huge difference in that. There's probably a white paper that can be written on an implementation that was attempted here organizationally about 5 years ago, where somebody tried to roll out a BI tool without a data warehouse and it did not go well. And lots of lessons learned from that. So absolutely having that robust data warehouse layer makes it so much easier to build your reports. For the most part, right, we're not doing anything other than calculations inside of our report, so all of the transformations are being done in the ETL work, and so that by the time it gets to an end user and a view layer, it's really cleansed data. And then just looking at the question here from Rochelle, she also touches on Tableau, and maybe R or other analytics tools. And so I would answer that part of the question with, yes, we are leveraging R, Python, and other analytics tools. Tableau is our primary presentation layer that we leverage. And so there's a number of other things being done with other tools on the market that is just leveraging the data that's in the data warehouse.
Yeah, one of our customers did a bit of a white paper a few years ago, and they documented it took a third less time out of the BI tool development side in their case. So not only were they productive in pulling up and presenting the data, it actually had that secondary benefit of simplifying BI delivery, which I thought was pretty interesting, and it's not unusual. In fact, that's usually what people end up doing when they are able to build a solid database.
No, I think there's, right, one of the great things about some of the BI tools that are on the market now is it's really easy to go and grab an Excel file or a CSV file and build some pretty visualizations. Where you start to hit the limits on solutions like that is when you're wanting to combine multiple data sources together that don't naturally fit, or you're trying to do more hardcore analytics, and it just makes it so much easier to have that data warehouse layer.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we've got probably time for one more question, and then we'll hand it back to Judd.
Certainly, if there are more questions, fire away while we await that or bring things to a close. I'll remind everybody that handouts are there and a link to the left. There's a couple of data sheets on some key components to WhereScape, copy of the presentation slides, some enterprise ROI use cases, sort of an infographic there that's part of that. And I will certainly say phenomenal work. Unbelievable that you can produce that amount of work that quickly with such a lean team to help make it happen. And certainly the consolidation, the speed, the consistency, and so forth has got to be a tremendous value. Any other follow-on comments or closing? Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thanks, Khrisha and Dustin. Appreciate your time, and I'll be looking forward to seeing you guys again. Really exciting story. Thank you again.
Yeah,
you bet.
Very
Thank
fun.
you.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Goodbye, everybody.
Okay, bye.